Hello, GAC family, Global Agro Connect listeners. It's another exciting episode of Global Agro Connect podcast with Akadusha Salvation. And today's topic, we are going to be talking about sterilization of soil for tomato planting. Why and how? Why should you sterilize the soil before planting your tomatoes? And how would you sterilize your soil before planting your tomatoes? We are going to be learning about that in today's podcast. Like I said before, I am Aka Joshua Salvation, the Agro King, and this is Global Agro Connect podcast. If you haven't followed us on Facebook, please do so at Global Agro Connect, on Instagram at gac.2020, and do not forget, subscribe to this channel, like this podcast, and please click on the notification bell to get your notification whenever our podcast episode drops. Now, on to the topic of today: sterilization of soil for tomato planting. Why and how? Now, what really is this sterilization? It has to do with killing soil-borne, or would I say nematode or harmful organisms in the soil that can actually cause problem for your tomatoes. And as we know, tomatoes are prone to nematode attack. Tomatoes and pepper, those two spices or those vegetable and spices, are actually very prone, very prone to nematode attacks. And whenever nematode attacks your tomatoes, it starts killing it from the roots, and before you know it, your plant is wilting and actually dying off. And before you know that, if you planted 200 stands, you will end up only harvesting 20 to 30 stands of your tomatoes, because when there is nematode in the soil, it takes the very heart of the tomato species to actually withstand such nematode, or to actually withstand such conditions. As we know, tomatoes are not water loving plants. That's why most of them are grown in greenhouses, and in places where there are no much water, tomatoes that can actually be grown in open space. But that's not what we're actually talking about here today. What we're talking about here today is actually on the reason why you sterilize your soil and how to sterilize it. Although your area, or would I say your location, necessarily might not actually require you sterilizing your soil, probably because your area is fertile or the soil is fertile. But a soil being actually fertile does not mean there are no nematodes. Whether most soil are actually fertile and still there are nematodes. Although, because there are some crops that are resistant to this nematode attack, but not your tomatoes. So you being able to plant your tomatoes, or for you to plant your tomatoes in that area, you have to actually find a way to sterilize your soil before planting your tomatoes. Another word for sterilization of soil is burning of the soil. You might say, I've been saying sterilize, and now it all boils down to boiling. Yes, and yes. Sterilization of soil is really burning of your soil. Now, just the same way snail, or the soil for snail production, is being burnt or is being cooked. Alright, you actually have to cook the soil you intend using to plant your tomatoes. And when cooking your soil, you can probably make use of a big pot or a drum. And whatever cooking medium you're using, be it firewood, or I would even prefer firewood because that is less expensive, and it would actually go a long way to cooking your soil in large quantity, especially if you are going to be doing, let's say, medium scale tomato production. Now, if you're going to be doing large scale, it might actually be very difficult if you for you to actually be able to sterilize your soil through the medium of boiling or of cooking. There are other mediums whereby soil, especially those in the greenhouses, can actually be sterilized to make sure that the soil nematodes are actually totally killed. And one of such is using black tarpaulin or black nylon to cover the whole area or the whole surface of the soil in the greenhouse area. Okay, or the soil you're going to be needing. You can get your soil inside the greenhouse, pour it and spread it evenly, then get your big nylon or your black nylon and use it to cover all areas inside the greenhouse and lay stones on it. Now this is actually effective during dry season because the heat in the greenhouse, or the effect of the heat in the greenhouse, will help to burn the soil nematodes. And after covering your soil, you could actually leave for 42 to 45 days. Now within this period of time, the soil-borne nematodes or the soil nematode would have actually been totally killed before you now introduce your organic manure. But unlike that, we're actually talking about if you're doing probably small scale, or you probably do not have your greenhouse to farm your tomatoes. Yes, you can actually do your tomatoes in a place whereby probably a dilapidated building that you can actually cover the top with a bit of a transparent nylon to prevent excessive rainfall, or probably at your backyard where you have little shade that does not allow excess rainfall to actually affect your tomatoes, or probably in the northern part where there is less incidence of heavy rainfall to actually drown your tomatoes. You can practice this medium, which is cooking or boiling your soil. Now after cooking the soil, make sure that all areas of the soil is very hot. Now if you have a thermometer, or you can actually measure the heat capacity or the heat content of your soil after cooking, it must be 100 degrees Celsius. So you have to cook it to 100 degrees before offloading it or taking it out of the drum or the pot. All right, so it must be to 100 degrees before taking it out of the soil or out of the pot. All right, now after that, you leave your soil to cool. Right, you leave your soil to cool. Now after the soil has totally cooled down, you're getting your poultry dung, all right, and your wood ash. You will acquire poultry dung. Yeah, poultry dung and your wood ash, sorry. So after getting your poultry dung and your wood ash, leave the poultry dung in the open air for all the ammonia gases and the carbon gases present in it to actually evaporate like totally. Now while you leave it out in the open space, sprinkle water from time to time. That's if it is actually a fresh poultry dung that still has so much gases. But if it doesn't have gases and it's decomposed, you can get the poultry dung mixed thoroughly with your soil and mix your wood ash in your required quantity. Okay, it all depends on the quantity you want to mix with it. Your required quantity, mix the wood ash with the soil that you have already mixed with your poultry dung, and leave for probably 10 to 12 hours for probably it to percolate. Several people do not actually need to leave it for that amount of time. They will just mix together and pot. But me, I prefer leaving it for some time so the whole process can actually, or the whole materials can mix thoroughly with themselves, and the soil microorganisms that are actually still present in those dung, or in that dung, can actually still mix together with other parts of the soil, in case there are places which are not properly mixed, to make sure that they get proper, or the soil actually, or the nutrients are distributed evenly around or within the soil, or within the sterilized soil. Now after mixing it together and leaving for probably 1 hour, let's even say 1 hour, let's not take it too much, let's say 1 hour for those who might not actually have so much time. After mixing and leaving for 1 hour, you then get your polythene pot. That's if you're intending using polythene pot, that's your nylon, black nylon that is used to contain flowers or seedlings. They are the bigger sizes that we actually make use of, that you can make use of for your tomatoes. Now after getting your polythene pot, you fill the polythene pot with your sterilized soil. Then you go ahead to planting your tomatoes. After planting, water immediately to allow the materials, or actually to allow the nutrients sink down and actually touch the root of, or have effect with the root of your tomato plant almost immediately. All right, that is actually how to sterilize your soil and make use of it. And now I think I've actually mentioned why we actually need to sterilize the soil. There are several places, like where I am now, we actually have incidents of nematodes in the soil, and we've been carrying out this process regularly, and we've been getting results, which is actually sterilizing our soil to kill the soil-borne nematodes that can actually cause harm to our plants. So when you actually have incidents of nematode, the best thing to do is actually to burn or cook your soil to kill such nematodes, and then introducing poultry dung or animal dung into it to refertilize your soil and use to pot your plant. Now note, when you are potting your plant, please and please, if you are placing the pot or the polythene pot on the ground, that same ground you're placing it, polythene pots have holes underneath that allows water to drain out. Now if you are placing your polythene pot on the same ground, be aware that nematode will still crawl into that soil. So all you just have to do is place a nylon on the ground before placing your polythene pot to prevent direct contact with the soil. If you are not making use of a greenhouse and you actually have stand, okay, you use bamboo sticks to make stand, or someone actually helps you make stand out of wood, that would actually be better. It would be better for you to place the polythene pot on those stands to prevent direct contact with the nematode infested ground or soil present in your area. Okay, that is how far I can actually go today. I decided to just chip in this because I believe it will be very important to several people out here. It's late hour of the night, and I just felt like telling someone or actually speaking to someone about this today. And Global Agro Connect podcast platform is the best for me anyways, to convey my knowledge and to actually share some other things with other farmers and intending farmers who would actually love to venture into this aspect of agriculture. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you sticking by. I am Aka Joshua Salvation. This is Global Agro Connect podcast.